Welcome to Alabama Gristmill. We've got a true Alabama pioneer story today. An Alabamian that was known throughout the world and actually conquered a plague almost. But first of all, I want to say hello to my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hello. I'm glad to be here today and talk about somebody that everybody's ever already heard of, but they probably don't know all these facts about him. So
yeah, actually, when I first saw this information, I don't know if I remembered it from my history classes. So you say you heard of it. I don't know. I think I've heard of it, but I didn't remember what it was all about.
Yeah, you didn't know the true story and how involved this man was in Alabama and how much of a pioneer he really was.
Yes, and this pioneer, we'll go ahead, is William Gorgas.
Right.
We'll get into the story, but see if you knew what he did and what his
try to recall what he did before we get into it. That'd be fun.
It's like a little trivia. Again, we give a shout out to our patrons, and we're really growing. The program's growing, and if you want to join in on being a patron, you can just go to the website and click the I want to be a patron button. Really helps us out here. We really appreciate it.
We definitely do, and we love interacting, hearing from our the people that are listening to us and telling us how things are going, if they like it or not. So it's always great.
Yes, and definitely share the podcast with anybody that you know that's into podcasts or into history. It is growing as well. We're getting new listeners every episode or every day, and we really are enjoying this method of getting history, trivia, facts, and knowledge out to you. Is that the best way to say it?
Yeah, it's not just trivia though. Some of it's really good history. That we're trying to find stories that people have not heard of and didn't know about.
Yeah, because Alabama is rich with a lot of history.
Oh yes.
That's what makes it easy to do what we're doing, is we're constantly finding new stuff. And if you got any stories you want to share with us, of course, then just pop us an email.
Oh, yeah.
info@alabamapioneers.com is the email.
Yeah, we'll try to see what we have on it. We may have already done some stories on it, too. We're finding things all the time. Little known facts. When I started researching this story, I've heard of this. I wasn't going to do one on it. And then I realized how closely connected and actually didn't live too far from where my family came from. So it became even more interesting after that.
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and let's get into the story now. And now that we've already done enough yibber-yabbering.
Yeah, yibber-yabber. That's a good word.
Let you go ahead.
I heard you say that one before.
I'll let you go ahead and start to tell us a little bit about William Crawford Gorgas.
Right. Some little known facts about him that he's known all over the world because if you didn't figure it out, he conquered the mosquito and malaria and yellow fever. And it was the reason why the Panama Canal was able to be built, because of him. But actually, a lot of people say he cured malaria and yellow fever, but he actually didn't cure it. A vaccine came much later. He was able to make the environment conducive for safe living where we didn't come down with it. And I really didn't go into it in very much detail in the textbooks and everything. They don't go into it a lot. But to change a whole society from one way of doing things to another, it's kind of hard back in those days, and he was pretty effective in doing that. He was born in October 3rd, 1854, at the home of his grandfather, John Gale, who also happened to be the 7th governor of Alabama. And so he's had a history way, way back. His parents were Josiah Gorgas and Amelia Ross Gale Gorgas. And Josiah had a good history in Alabama, too. He graduated from West Point in 1841, and he served in the Mexican-American War. And when he served at Mount Vernon Arsenal down in Mobile. That's where he met Amelia Gale, who was the daughter of John Gale. It was a hard decision to leave the army and join the Confederacy when it came around, and his wife didn't want him to leave the army. She wanted him to stay with the Union Army. But he decided he was in the state of Alabama, so he felt like he needed to join the Confederacy. And Josiah was appointed chief of ordnance of the Confederacy. He worried about the military hardware, and he was involved in getting cotton to Europe to trade for munitions, power, and so forth. And he established many armories and foundries to manufacture the weapons. So he was very essential to the Confederacy during the war between the states. In 1866, after the war was over, all that experience became very beneficial, though, because he and some other investors reopened Briarfield, which is between Bibb County and Shelby County. It's a very famous ironworks there that was built, and it was very helpful during the Confederacy. And his family joined him there. At times, it was hard after the Civil War, and the ironworks failed in 1869, so he wound up taking a position as headmaster of the University of the South in Swanee, Tennessee. So he went to Tennessee and left Alabama for a while. I guess he got homesick because he accepted a position as president of the University of Alabama in 1878, and so they moved back into the old 1829 mansion on the campus of the University of Alabama. Well, sadly, he was getting kind of elderly at this point, I imagine, had a series of strokes, so he was forced to resign. But the trustees really thought so much of him that they gave him the house for his retirement. And the house is still on the campus of the University of Alabama. It's called the Gorgas House. Just about everybody's been down there and knows where that is. It's a nice, beautiful, not real large house, but it's a very nice house on the campus and very well restored. After his death in 1883, Amelia became the university's librarian. So there's a strong connection between Gorgas and the University of Alabama. They're both buried in Evergreen Cemetery. Now, on to how William Gorgas, the son, defeated the mosquito. And I said it again. He defeated the mosquito and enabled the Panama Canal to be built. At the time, yellow fever was one of the most dreaded diseases in the port cities of the United States. In fact, in 1793, if you go back that far, the death toll was around 5,000 in Philadelphia. And the only thing that would stop it was a cold front that killed the mosquitoes. And people didn't know that the mosquitoes were the cause of it in 1793. They just knew that they get around the big cities, and it would, because the population was so strong there, they'd have epidemics. And so a lot of people moved out not knowing that they were still kicking around the mosquitoes anyway. But if you survived, you were immune for life. So the people came from countries where they contracted it, didn't get it, and confused the disease with other things. Many slaves didn't wind up getting it because they had already had it in Africa, and they were able to survive because you became immune to it. Usually, it was countries where you didn't have many mosquitoes that people came from, and they were the ones that would go first. Mobile had a severe epidemic in 1819, so if you're looking for ancestors are all in Mobile, you might look into the deaths that occurred there, because it lasted even into 1822. The small town of Blakely, which had been really growing, near Mobile had such a severe epidemic that it almost wiped out the town. And in New Orleans, 7,849 people died of a 25,000 population. Can you imagine that? That's just really,
I mean, that's a tremendous amount of people.
It is. I mean, all of a sudden, and it would go quite quickly. They couldn't even bury their dead fast enough. There was a whole group of people called the Can't Get Away Club that was formed, and these people were actually set up to take care of the people. And when they didn't leave the city, they took care of the people that got yellow fever. But a lot of them succumbed to the disease themselves because they didn't know what was causing it. 8,000 left the city to try to get out, and those that stayed were really heroes to stay behind and try to take care of people, because most people just would want, if somebody got it, they'd leave town. They didn't want to catch it. They thought it was contagious, and they'd get out of town and get away from it. The epidemic,
it's almost like almost a leprosy type situation.
Yeah.
They didn't want to get that is just a massive a scary thing in those times.
That's exactly right. A lot of ministers wound up in fact, one of my relatives wound up staying down down there, and he wound up dying because of that. It was this man named Starr, Reverend Starr. Epidemics weren't often reported because the business community feared if they might have a quarantine and the whole city be shut down, because they thought it was contagious is what they thought. They didn't realize that these mosquitoes flying around were the reason before it. And they get upset and say, well, if we let out the word, they'll quarantine the city and we won't have any business. And they were usually at ports, so it was really difficult. It was spread quickly through Savannah, Georgia, Texas, any city that had a port, because a lot of times they brought the mosquitoes in with them. It went as far as Memphis and Tennessee and Vicksburg because of the rivers and all. And many cities were almost completely wiped out. Like I said, the Blakely, which was a really growing one, that was a major reason for its downfall. About that time, in 1882 and 1880, the French decided to build the Panama Canal. But they were having great bit of difficulty because all the water and tropical environment and mosquitoes around, it threatened any attempt they were making. So people just didn't understand how it was transmitted. In 1881, Dr. Carlos Juan Finley of Cuba decided to experiment with some mosquitoes and human volunteers, and he concluded that the mosquito was the reason that they were bringing in the disease. So he was really the one that discovered that it had occurred, but that didn't help anybody. How do you stop it? What can you do to stop the mosquitoes? You can't catch everyone and kill everyone. Bacteriologist Walter Reed, who was head of the U.S. Army Medical Commission, started testing some of his research, Dr. Finley's research, on non-immune people. And by 1901, they determined that it took 10 to 12 days after being bitten that the disease was transmitted. So you can see how quickly it could spread. A few mosquitoes, you got a major epidemic on hand. In the midst of all the epidemic in Mobile, William was born in Mobile at the home of his father on October 3rd, 1854. But he didn't contract the disease. He never contracted the disease at that time. William became a doctor and was appointed to the U.S. Army Medical Corps in June 1880. And he was assigned to 3 posts in Texas. One of them was Fort Brown, and where he survived yellow fever. And that made him, luckily that made him immune. There he met his wife, Marie Cook Dowdy, and she was treated when she got immune too. She got the disease as well. So they were lucky. Both of them were now immune. They would not get it again. But then he was sent to Havana, Cuba, and it was, you can imagine, that was a tropical environment. So the yellow fever and malaria, everything was just raging out of control there, and they didn't know what to do. And he was appointed to the chief sanitary officer to try to figure out a solution. He looked at the research of Dr. Finley and Walter Reed, and he set about trying to come up with a way to control the mosquito population. Within months, which was amazing, the city was clear of yellow fever, and it was 18 years before another yellow fever death occurred. So he would get rid of anything that was breeding grounds for the mosquito, which people tell you to do today. If you want to stop something going on with a virus like this brought by the mosquito, you have to control the places that might, hold moisture or water or things like that. That's what he did.
Absolutely. I've done that already in my backyard a few times.
Yeah, but back then they didn't think that was important. They see, a pond or water and they think, well, we got it. It's not hurting anything. But he had to change society as a whole in Cuba. And that's kind of hard. You got to have a lot of political power to kind of get that changed, because they didn't understand that the mosquito was causing them that harm. And when the U.S. took control of the Panama Canal project in 1904, 12,000 workers had died during the construction of the railway. Can you imagine that? 12,000 people, and 22,000 during the French effort to build the canal. So you put those together, you can see how much that Panama Canal project cost in a lot of human lives. But after his success in Cuba, Gorgas was appointed in 1904 to be the head of sanitation and the hospitals in the canal zone. And that's where he got his reputation, because that was such a major project worldwide. If they could get across that strip of land where the canal zone is, then they would be able to quickly make a trip all the way to the other side into the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean. It would save thousands and thousands of dollars in shipping for that major break. So he was met with a lot of resistance from U.S. officials who really didn't believe in Gorgas. They say he cured it, but did he really know what he's talking about? So he had to fight the bureaucracy like you always do when something new comes up. But the last major outbreak in the U.S. occurred in 1905 in New Orleans after his theories and his plans came about. He served as president of the American Medical Association in 1909 and 10 because of all of his achievements, because that was such a major one. In 1927, scientists finally isolated the yellow fever virus in West Africa, and that's when a vaccine was made and developed in the 1930s. But like his father, on July 3rd, 1920, Gorgas sadly died of a stroke in London, England. And he and his wife are buried in Arlington Cemetery. And his daughter, Eileen, is also buried there. So if you ever go there, you can probably find his grave and see him. But he was a true Alabamian that came up with a really, really great idea. Ideas, and saved a lot of lives because of it.
I'd say he's a true Alabama hero.
He's a true Alabama hero. That's right.
And an Alabama pioneer, definitely.
I guess he had that Alabama charm, so he could, get them to convince the people to make some changes in their lives to stop the mosquito breeding.
I mean, he was one of the core instrumental people to get the Panama Canal built, because without him, everybody would have been dying from the malaria.
Yeah, and just think how many people have been born that because of him, would have probably died if they hadn't followed his advice about controlling the mosquito environment. I mean, it didn't just go on in the South either. It went on in the North, anywhere there's rivers or waters, anywhere there's a mosquito. When you get a heavy rainfall like we've been having here lately, and you mix it with mosquitoes, you got a problem.
It is definitely that time of year, and in the South especially, mosquitoes, they can get big.
Oh, they can. They get very big, and they can carry many, many viruses and things like that. So you have to control them. But it was nice. The discovery that was a cause really gave the impetus to change. But you have to go through a lot of... He must have been a pretty good diplomat to convince those people to change their life.
Well, yeah, from, allowing the conditions for the Panama Canal to be built all the way to us having a cookout in the backyard.
Exactly. You think about that the next time you see those little mosquitoes going around out there. You think about, thank goodness for Gorgas, you probably couldn't be doing what you're doing.
Yes, this is true. Well, that's a great story, and we've got, all these stories on the website in more detail. We've got pictures as well, and video and things like that. So you can also find a lot of these in...
There's even a video of Gorgas, an old video we discovered of Gorgas, so you get to see what he looks like. And there may be a lot of Alabamians that find they're related to him, with the strong roots that he has in Alabama.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know much about him because he was in University of Alabama. If you went there, you would know.
Right. Exactly.
Because he's well known on the campus, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. But people don't think about it. You see the Gorgas building, I've toured it and all that. And I think, he cured your... He didn't cure... It's interesting to know the details rather than just the real details, about somebody's life. It brings it out more. He was just a regular guy, came up with a really good solution, and convinced a lot of people
to change. Not just a name on the building, not just a name on the building.
That's right. And a few facts about him. I mean, you lose it a little bit, but you think about him as a real person trying to convince him. If he and his wife hadn't survived yellow fever, they probably couldn't have done it because they would have been killed in Cuba probably when they went down there. It was such a bad, it's so rampant at the area. He was... Yeah,
so humid and so, just rife with mosquitoes and malaria.
Right.
We'll go ahead and wrap this one up here. That's another great story there. And we'll go ahead and let Red Foley play us out. If you have any questions or anything, as always, please send us an email or comment on our Facebook page. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this episode up. And we'll get Red Foley to play us out. with a little Alabama Jubilee. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh honey.